Today, we delve into the pressing migration crisis affecting Spain, particularly in the Canary Islands, and the recent political tensions surrounding it. Welcome back to Riks Europe, Jorge González-Gallarza, Fellow and Senior Coordinator for the Iberosphere.
Thank you for having me on again, Rebecca. Good to see you.
So the migration issues have become a political background between the left and the right in Spain, seemingly. In your opinion, how can both sides work together to address this humanitarian crisis while also managing their political agendas?
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think, it really has become apparent, I think, to a lot of us in Spain, to an extent that just wasn't visible maybe 5 or 10 years back, that immigration is now a hot button issue in Spain. And it's really ranking among the top 3 concerns of the population, not just among the sort of the right-wing parties, certainly the right-wing party Vox and the center-right PP, but even also on the parties that are making up the ruling left-wing coalition. That's also being an issue for them, for at least 30% of voters on the Socialist side, on the main party in the coalition. But what I want to do is to just kind of take a step back from the conversation we had a few days ago and to just kind of like take stock of what has been happening in the Canary Islands, which is being the microcosm of this crisis. And this is just, I think, really special that in Spain, our migration, when it comes to the inflows of migrants coming in, this is really being concentrated in one archipelago where, thousands of, like we said, more than 25,000 in just 2024 so far, migrants coming in, and this is really being concentrated in just a few islands. And what I want to remind your audience is that ever since we spoke a few days ago, the situation's getting far worse. We're seeing new arrivals every week, almost on a daily basis. We're seeing new dinghies where migrants coming in, very unsafe, very unhealthy conditions. I want to remind your audience that the Canary Islands, the Atlantic route for migrants through the Canary Islands, as opposed to the ones through Greece or Italy, this one is particularly unsafe. We're seeing also many deaths at high sea. So this is also being a concern for Spaniards on this side of the water. Now, just like the arrivals are spiking, the concerns in the rest of Spain around security are also being exacerbated as well. And this really centers around the role of unaccompanied minors, which you and I discussed last time around as well. But what has happened, to your question, is that, again, let's remind that the Canary Islands is alone. It is one region in a highly decentralized territorial system, so it lacks the powers, the competences to be able to, on its own, deter new arrivals, because again, this is being kind of regulated at a supranational level through protocols that are being legislated in Europe. The Spanish government also has some leeway, but certainly the Canary Islands wouldn't be able on its own, even if it wanted to, and even if it was able to through its own means, to really police the borders and make sure that these arrivals are not leaving the coasts of Mauritania in the first place. And they're unable to deter the arrivals, but they're also not being helped by the rest of the country in terms of the regions that don't want to have the burden of these migrants coming in being spread to other regions. So the Canary Islands is in a double bind. What do? We're seeing, thousands of people coming in. We're unable to process them. Our shelters and our welcoming centers are being overrun. We simply lack the personnel. We lack the staff. We lack the means. We lack the money to be able to process all of these asylum claims and to give these migrants the haven that they ask for. And so this is where it's becoming a political issue, to your question. And I'll say a few more things later on in the conversation. But what has happened is that, the Canaries are on its own, and we have 3 players right now in the negotiations to see where we go next. One of them is the regional government of the Canary Islands, which is a coalition between a nationalist party and the center-right. We're seeing the center-right party, which is the main opposition party, which is just pulled out of the negotiations, and I'll explain why later. And we're seeing the socialists. And these 3 sides are not agreeing on the way forward. So maybe we can get into why that is.
Yes, because how do you interpret the Partido Popular's decision to suspend negotiations with the socialist government over the migration crisis?
Absolutely. That really is kind of top of the news cycle right now. This was the news that came in on Saturday. This was the spokesperson for the Partido Popular, for the center-right party in Spain, for the main opposition party to the current left-wing coalition, ruling coalition, they've pulled out of the four-way negotiation. So essentially there was a roundtable in which there were two representatives from the government. One was the Minister for Territorial policies, right? The minister kind of overseeing the powers that are apportioned to each region. Then there was the minister for childcare and infancy, and I mean, let's remember that the problem is the unaccompanied minors. So there's also a concern around how are we treating these unaccompanied minors. So this minister was also part of the conversations. Then there was the PP, and then there was the regional president, and the PP pulled out because what they alleged was that the central government, the Socialists, are asking all of the regions in Spain, the majority of which are run by the opposition, by the PP. The central government is asking these regions to take in more of these minors, and yet the PP accuses the central government of not accepting money and help from the EU. So what the PP is saying essentially is, look, Madrid, you have to take in all of the help that you can get from Europe and abroad. And then the rest of the regions, we will be able to step in and take more migrants. Because what the PP regions and what the PP nationally is saying is that we don't want to take more migrants unless the issue at the border is fixed. Because if we take more now, then that will mean that 2-3 months down the road, we will be asked to take the same decision, which is unpopular in our region. So let's fix the issue now at the border through more means. Let's get Frontex involved. Let's get the EU involved. Let's also quicken the EU asylum, migration and asylum pact, which is slated to come into effect in 2026. So this is what the EPP is asking, and they pulled out of the negotiations. And however, there was a plenary debate yesterday in Parliament, and you are seeing the Socialist Party warming up to this view, to the views of the PP, and now they're making more pledges to get the EU involved. They're making more pledges to have Frontex be a part of the solution. So I think this is really where it's going now. And I want to, just to close, I want to remind Rebecca, your audience, that the last time you and I spoke, I mentioned that in the absence of a solution, in the absence of a sustainable solution, the government of the Canary Islands was having to take it upon itself and make unilateral decisions to be able to police these arrivals and make sure that, to the best of their ability, they weren't being overrun. And what happened was, and they established stricter protocols upon arrival. And what happened was that the Constitutional Court of the country overruled these protocols because they alleged that they infringed upon the fundamental rights of the migrants, the fundamental rights of these unaccompanied minors. So, because, again, our Constitution wasn't written with this sort of situation in mind, where now we have to take really, really tough measures. So this is the sort of the bind that Spain is in at the moment. And that's what we will be following in the days coming.
Thank you, Jorge González-Gallarza, Fellow and Senior Coordinator for the Iberosphere.
Thank you very much for having me on, Rebecca.
And thank you for watching Riks Europe.